Get going here. We just had a very active round with dealing with early stage, and it affects everyone. We're now moving over to something very near and dear to my heart. We have, at the Stetson Family Office, been studying kind of the broken system that we have here in private equity funding for healthcare. And one of the things that we've observed is what we were talking about in the last panel, we're not going to repeat it here, is the valley of death. And there are some solutions to that. But the other side of that is when you get into the takeoff space where angels are starting to invest and venture capitalists are starting to invest, what about family offices and how do they work and how do they come together and all? And that's what we're going to be looking at in this panel. And I'm very honored that we have such a good panel. But let me sort of tee it up in another way. One of the observations, I was sitting in a presentation by one of the venture capitalists, and he was talking about essentially having a $500 million fund where they put 10 investments of $50 million each into a good therapeutic that's going to take 12 to 15 years to figure out if it's going to work or it's not. And typically a binary type of situation, but if you actually get something, it accomplishes what the venture capitalists want. The venture capitalist wants to get a management fee for all that time, and then they want 20% of the upside over $500 million. I totally get it because I've been a venture capitalist since 1980, so I fully understand that. But I'm also a family office guy, and I'm moving more into the family office and family office investing. We don't want anything close to that. We want, I think, something much more similar to what the angels want. We want to have something where it's going to be a shorter period of time, where we can actually get something that can be done for $15 million or less. And I think those things are out there, and I'm going to ask the panel to comment on all of that. But if we can get, and I'll give you an example, a traumatic brain injury, particularly concussions and the like. I've seen some really interesting work being done. And I think it can be done with family offices, with angels, at a much lower cost, and it can be done in 6 to 8 years with even with some testing. And it's clearly an issue that has to be dealt with. The National Football League has all of the former athletes that have all these concussions. They're going to have to deal with it in some kind of way. So it's a must-do type of thing. My observation is that this is not something that venture capitalists want to do because it's too short, and they can't put enough money into it to make it worth their while. And I do remember the days not too long ago where New Enterprise Associates had $75, $80 million funds, $110 million funds. I do remember those days. But they're over $3 billion. I mean, if you're over $3 billion, what can you really invest in? You're not investing in the early stage stuff. That kind of money is really only very later stage expansion capital. So I'm really excited that we have a very good panel here, and I've been to at least the Sky Ventures and observed it's kind of a nice combination of both venture and family offices. But with each of you comment to what extent you have family offices, and if you would introduce yourselves and talk about how might the angel investors work more closely with the family offices, and what's your perspective on it?
Sure. So I'm happy to lead off. So my name is David Abraham. I'm a member at Sky Ventures in Boston. And we sort of have an integrated group of investors in Sky Ventures. So we have individual angels. We have family offices, a few of them.
Do you have any rogue angels? I thought that was a really cool term.
Rogue angels. Sorry, family offices. And we also have strategics. So These are companies that are interested in early stage deal flow. I should mention Sky Ventures is exclusively life sciences, which distinguishes it a little bit from some other angel groups that may be looking at different types of investments. I think Chuck mentioned a little bit about time horizons and total investment, potential dilution. So angel investments or early stage investment, particularly in life sciences, you have to be a little bit creative because it's extremely capital intensive. And so what we found is that there are particular categories that we tend to gravitate towards. So therapeutics in general, if you're talking to angels, isn't it unless there's a creative way to finance. So if you have to raise, I mean, bottom line number, right, in order to get a drug, particularly biologic, to file on your licensure, it's $250 million, right? I mean, plus minus, depending on the therapeutic area. And by the time an angel network has put in, let's say, single-digit millions, they're completely diluted, right? Because they're going to be the first money in. So you have to find places where there's potential for non-dilutive financing, something creative, in a particular therapeutic area, if you're looking at TBI. So you have to be sort of disciplined about what you can actually do and what you can't.
Well, maybe just a question or so.
Sure.
I always thought, and I knew one of the first angels was Hans Sevens out in the Band of Angels out in the 1982 time frame, because I lived in San Francisco there. But what is the process that you have on? I always had the idea that you would bring in like 2 people for a dinner and make a presentation, excuse them, and vote and say, okay, you bring them back in and say, you got so much, you didn't get any. But that's not the process anymore. What I was really amazed at is that, and to some degree, you're taking the role of the venture capitalist that won't get involved that early, and you do a very thorough due diligence, but you have an interesting process. Can you explain the process?
Absolutely. Sure. And it's, and I appreciate the implied compliment. I mean, I think that our process is good. I don't think that it's necessarily unique in the sense that I think that most folks who are looking to invest, and as an individual angel, you're looking to invest your own money, you want to take time to make sure that you understand potential asset, to understand the mechanism, how they're going to move forward, those sorts of things. So we have about 100 to 150 members. A fair number of those folks are going to be individual angels. We're pretty well tied into the early stage life sciences community, and so we actually have abundant deal flow. I mean, we get some stuff. I referred a number of folks. I went to an earlier Resi conference, met some folks there, and referred those into the process. But everybody knows people, and we also regularly have investments that percolate. So last time, I think, the last meeting Maria was there, we had an investment that had come to us, was too early, waited a little while, matured a little bit, and then came back. And I think that they actually moved forward with diligence. So these sort of early stage opportunities are then referred to a screening committee of some very dedicated people. And they look at them and try to understand at a basic level with sort of very minimal information, is this something that the membership would potentially invest in or not? Once it passes that point, there's a limited number of companies that are invited to present at a meeting. These meetings take place, once a month, once every month and a half or so, a little bit less during the summer. And then afterwards, the membership votes on whether they want to move forward with diligence. If there's enough folks who are interested in getting into diligence, and this is actually a place where the various constituencies come together, so there's individual angels, their family offices, and also some strategics that might be interested in, if they have some sort of particular area there. And then we'll move forward with the diligence process, write a report, and then go back out to the members and see who wants to actually come in on the deal.
Great. Victoria, you have a very interesting situation because you like to invest in women, as I understand it. Can you also, as you're introducing yourself, can you comment on your process, and can you comment on your observations of backing women?
Sure. So I'm Victoria Pettibone.
Yeah, it's on.
Okay, great. And I'm the managing director of ASTIA. I've been with the organization for about 6 years now. Our angel group launched in 2013. We started on the West Coast. We had some serial entrepreneurs who were some of our founding members. So I always think of us as a very entrepreneur-centric angel group. We try to be. And then we started launching membership on the East Coast in 2014 and in the UK in 2015. We have about 60 members. We are members in Norway, Australia. So we are international, though we're a fairly small group. And we do everything as one unit. We don't work in chapters. So we have virtual calls weekly with our angels. We do everything on video conference. We are a true virtual organization. But we also do in-person meetings. So we'll do in-person monthly meetings in New York and the Bay Area and sort of quarterly in UK. We have our first Norway meeting coming up in a couple of weeks in Bergen. So we are about half men, half women in terms of investors. But all of our investments have to have at least one woman in the leadership team holding equity, significant influence. So it's just looking for teams that are inclusive. You know, it's not too radical. It's just looking for teams that actually include women. We have also ample deal flow. It's amazing when I hear people say, well, are there enough companies? Yes, there are enough companies that fit that criteria. We have more companies coming to us than we can invest in. We do have family offices as some of our members, and they really operate the same way as all the angels. So, from the outside, you wouldn't know that it's a family office angel member. I find that the family offices who are attracted to Astia really want to start doing some direct investment. They obviously have all their other strategies that they're doing, but they really like the hands-on feel of being in an angel group. They love the mission, and so they're very integrated. Like I said, you wouldn't necessarily know that they are with a family office or part of a family office.
Well, I'll make an observation. If you go to venture capital, it's only 8% of the decision makers are women. Angels have really tried to put the effort on to get more women as investors. It's up to 25%. One of the goals we've set for the Global Family Office Bioforum that we convene is to get 25% women. And it's kind of interesting, at least on the venture capital side, women tend to, about 50% of the people they back are women CEOs. Could you comment about that, and do you have many women CEOs in your portfolio, and how are they doing?
Yeah. So most of the companies, not all the companies have a woman CEO, but most of them do. And if it's not the CEO, it's going to be the CTO or the CMO, somebody right up there. And in venture, the numbers, I'm not sure which number you were saying, but it's still less than 2% of venture funding goes to women CEOs,
right,
which is amazing. So one of the things I am finding is that some of our very successful companies who have hitting all their milestones, really on fire, are having enormous difficulty raising their Series B round. It's amazing, and they're the Series A and the Series B, and you look at why, and there's nothing that really makes sense other than, could it really be just that it's a woman going out raising? It's kind of shocking, but there are cases where we've been pretty amazed at how hard some of the companies have struggled to do that venture funding round. But generally, our portfolio is doing really, really well, very, very strong performing. We've had 5 exits in our 5 years of investing. 4 had above market returns. 1 was not, it was an asset sale, and nothing came back to the investors. But the other 4 were very successful. And our most successful was a medical device company, Envision Medical, which we were the Series A investors and the Series B investors, and that exited to Boston Scientific this past April for an initial payment of $150 million, and then there are contingency payments that could take it up to $275 million. And that was a company run by a woman, Survi Sarna, who had a really hard time raising money. Initially, we were one of the first investors to come in and help rally other investors to put money in. And it was a product, a medical device that enables a gynecologist to access a woman's fallopian tubes to collect cells and then test them for cancer. And she just would go to all these meetings and nobody got, she was amazed at how the people just didn't seem to understand why that would be a great tool to have out there. So now we're all very happy.
Yeah, no, I think this is a really important thing. And one of the things we'd like to do is make sure that we can get more women decision makers in family offices that would help support those kinds of rounds. So that's kind of a goal.
And I find that the family offices really care about that change the world aspect as well as making money. For the most part, my experience has been that there is a vision there is a mandate, most of the family offices, to leave the world, to think about the future of the world and leave it in a better place and think about the future generations. And so I do find that those angel members are really attracted to the things like a medical device that's going to be so impactful.
Great, great. Yaniv, could you introduce yourself?
Sure. So, I'm Yaniv Snor, one of the founders of Mid-Atlantic BioAngels. We're one of the only angel groups that are specifically and exclusively focused on therapy, on life sciences, and have some colleagues here as well. We invest in therapeutics, devices, and diagnostics only. We don't do anything with a dash in it, so no e-health, m-health, whatever health, we don't do that. We invest similarly to what you're looking for as well, Chuck. We look for things that require up to $15 or $20 million before they can exit. There are plenty of those that within enough data, within that kind of money, can exit actually in the therapeutic space, the diagnostics and devices space. We invest all over the world. We have about 50 active members in the group that meet in New York City 10 times a year. Nothing happens in the summer, although too much happened this last summer. We are about 7 years old. Are statistically speaking, of every 100 applications that come in, about 23 are invited to present. The other 77 are rejected in that pre-stage. And we tell companies why not. Just in case we're wrong, they're welcome to tell us you missed something, and we'll be happy to engage with them in discussion. Of the 23 that come in to present, 16 move on to due diligence, of the 16 to receive money. So it's a 2% yield, which I assume is pretty similar to my colleagues here. So we see a lot of things we say no to. I tell a lot of companies that every time I meet with them that we're looking for companies where management would inspire us, because we invest primarily, first of all, foremost in people. There are people who are bringing technology that will change the standard of care, so it's not incremental. In a market that's large and growing, so that there's actually potential for an exit, and everybody says, that's us. But 2% are.
It's funny, August was our busiest month this past year. and I wanted to go on vacation. I don't know what happened.
We have a very big group here. I'd like to open it up, and there seems to be a lot of interest in this. This is actually a new area. We're one of the sponsors here at Resi, and I said, you really got to pull together a panel on families and angels, and what you're all doing is validating that this was a good idea. So how about a few questions from the audience?
How do you decide the difference between 2% and 3%?
So I can speak to sort of Sky, which, the difference between 2%, 3% isn't something that is a constant or anything like that. I think what it really comes down to is, in the context of particularly angel-style investing, is group consensus. And so we don't have any particular targets. It's just, does the company that's presenting have a good enough investment case to garner interest? It's very much a market-driven kind of thing, right? So you have, at least at Sky, I don't know what the process is elsewhere, but when people come in, they have an inspirational message. They talk about transformational business models or things for patients. That gets sort of people excited, right? And Sky Ventures is, most of the people there have life sciences backgrounds. They've been through the battles of developing products or services, and they see something new and interesting that we sort of glom onto it. And then there's some stuff, even the stuff that we don't necessarily invest in, doesn't mean it's bad. It just means that they didn't attract enough investment. Some of those companies go on to do some really wonderful things.
Yeah, for that specific reason, we don't tell companies about the world about the companies we do not invest in because somebody might find them attractive.
Sure.
And just because we didn't like them, I mean, I didn't invest in Google, but they did pretty well, right? So,
I like the way that you were willing to relook at a company that made some progress. And
Wow.
so you're really open-minded. I think once you get it turned down from a venture capital firm, you're not going back there. They're not going to have you back.
Well, and I can only speak really to specific sort of locales, so I can speak to Boston, I can speak to Silicon Valley. I think it's about relationships. And in the context of investing, this is something actually I got, it's a great conversation I had with somebody a couple months ago, is former CEO of a company that's done very, very well, therapeutics. He's talking to venture capitalists with no active, I mean, he has something that he's talking to them about, but no active timeline for them to invest. And the same thing happens. I mean, the sort of the value of the network is extraordinary in this because people, I think Yannick was mentioning they invest sort of in teams. You have to get to know the people, and if it turns out that you're in an early stage, you're not really getting the kind of interest that you'd like to get, you keep going. Entrepreneurs don't stop. That's sort of the definition of an entrepreneur. And if it gets less risky, more interesting, you could say yes the second time around.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think the most important thing is the relationship and building over time, and we are betting on the jockey, as it were. I mean, all of this is so high risk. You could have the best idea, you could have the most amazing market, but everything's going to change, and if you are able to be flexible enough but still have vision that you can pivot a bit and deal with the hurdles that come up, those are the things that we're really looking at. Who is this person? So I think a lot of it is building relationship over time, and there are entrepreneurs who came to us 3 years ago that now we're looking at because we've built that relationship and they've de-risked the business in some way, and now we're able to step forward and make the investment.
So the last question on our application is, if you've applied to us in the past and you've been rejected, remind us why you've been rejected and tell us what has changed since. And some people forget that they were rejected, and some people, it's very telling. There's some trick questions there as well in the questionnaire. The biggest trick question, by the way, is how can investors lose their money? You have to pay attention to that question. But in terms of, so we welcome companies to say, we had these issues that you told us about when you said no to us, but we've since dealt with them in a specific way, and that's that's very interesting for us. And ultimately, we're all looking for a reason to invest, a reason to say yes. So the more reasons we can have for that, the better it is for us.
That's great. More questions? You have a question here?
I'm from Rice University, and I have a question for Victoria. Like you just mentioned, there are few females in this field, and we're trying best to increase the proportion of females workers. And is there anything I can do to prepare for that, like any courses or any activities, lectures I can do to increase myself to get into this field?
I think, again, the network is so important. So I think continuing to build relationships with people in the industry, men and women, is probably the best thing that you can do for yourself, along with all of the courses that you're taking. But I think it's about knowing people and building those relationships over time.
I'm going to come to you.
It's very short.
Yeah, sure. I just want to make one comment here. One of the things we're doing, an initiative in the family office, Sets Family Office, is to have a women's healthcare. We'd really like to see, as I mentioned, at least 25% of the investment decision being made by the family office women. But we also want to see more entrepreneurs, and we want to really start building that network so that people like yourself have someone that you can relate to a little bit more. And I think it's important in life science, they say that 70%, or in healthcare, 70% of the decisions in a family are made by the woman. In my daughter, and youngest daughter's case, she says, well, it's 100% here. So there needs to be better representation, and that's one of the things that we're going to be pushing for ourselves.
Just a short one. We normally associate business angel with small tickets, and then we see big deployment of quite significant amounts sometimes. Could you just mention what's the ticket size And also, if you only invest, because a business angel normally is associated with local investment, or if you invest internationally. I heard Victoria saying that the association is very international, very broad, but just to know from the other organizations.
So we would invest all over the world.
Okay.
We typically invest between $250,000 to $1 million, but there was one deal that we invested in, which was a UK company we could not syndicate, and we ended up putting $11 million into them on our own. So it really depends on the entrepreneur. If you get the room excited, there will be money that just flows in. Sometimes it's early, so there's less money in the room. But it really depends on the entrepreneur.
Yeah, I'd say our average ticket size is about 250,000. We've gone as high as $1 million, and we do invest across borders.
Well, actually, one more thing I want to say. Angels are very friendly with each other. So if we've funded a company, but we haven't been able to fund them completely, we will reach out to other angel groups and to see if they want to be able to join in the round. Because once we invest in a company, anybody here invest in a company, we have an interest in the company succeeding, and part of it is being well-funded, funded enough. And so we want to make sure that we can bring in other angel investors to invest with us. And we all play really well in the sandbox together.
I think that's one of the big changes that I've seen in the angel community is the syndication. And it really came home to me. I was talking to the people at the Desert Angels in Tucson. And they said, well, we invest in Boston, Chicago, Los Angeles. Okay, that's pretty cool. And they participate in syndication. So I think that's a major shift that I certainly wasn't. I've been in the industry since 1980. I would have thought that I would have known a little bit more about that. But this is a really interesting development. And I think it's going to be very helpful. And one of the things that we've seen, I'll just do a more generic approach in what we're trying to do with family offices, is that I was talking to a family office that's in the real estate business, and they made their money in real estate. And what they have done and how they made their money is they invest with other families and they share deals. And they, if you're getting the deal in the local community that these people live in, they get the first shot at it. So you're getting the second shot at it. You're not getting the first shot at all the good deals. They're going to take that themselves. So I think that there's really an opportunity. In one case, the father was on the board of a local hospital for 30 years. So he obviously interested in healthcare, was chairman of the board several times. But a deal comes in. What do I deal with? How do I deal with something in healthcare or life science? They have no basis for doing it. So what we're hoping to do is recreate in the family office space kind of a group of a network that sort of trusts each other, because I think there's high trust among the angels, right? So you want to get that trust network going, and so that when something comes in, they have something they can do with it. So this is kind of interesting. There are some experts they can go to that, you're not going to get 100% guarantee that something's going to work, but you can determine whether you've got a good shot at it and the like. So I think that we're in a very interesting time where a lot of things are going to change very rapidly, and particularly as the angels and the families start working more and more together. So I'm really quite excited about it. Do we have a question there?
Yeah, not necessarily your specific things, but a propensity for angels and family offices to lead versus to follow, as opposed to VCs.
Sure. So we have no problems leading. Typically, we have, so for investments where we have domain expertise, things like that, it's fine for us to lead. What we usually find for life sciences, particularly investments that get members excited, is they've already raised money or they're in the process of raising money and identified additional investors. So sometimes you need to have a lead come in because they've got people who don't want to lead already in the potential syndicate. Sometimes they have identified a lead and we'll let them go. We do our diligence regardless of whether we're leading or not in the round.
Yeah, we'll lead or not, and we're happy to do either. I think we do a bit more diligence for leading. We'll make sure we do a real deal memo, whereas if we're following on and somebody else has a deal memo they've done, we'll read it and just do a little bit of supplementary due diligence.
Yeah, we don't care if we lead or follow. We'll do the same amount of diligence regardless. We'll read other diligences if we have them, but we'll do the diligence ourselves. One thing I forgot to mention, though, we will not invest ahead of VCs. If we think an opportunity requires VC money, we'll not invest in it. We'll tell them to go to VCs directly.
Yeah, I think that's very important. One of the things that we're working on that I really find very interesting is one of our Stetson Family Office, we really want to see someone that's institutional investor, or we want to see someone that's a credible family. We haven't worked as closely with the Angels, but we do hope to work more closely with you guys because you're vetting stuff. I mean, we want to go into stuff that, and maybe vetting might be too strong a word, but we want to do something where there's some due diligence that's been done and the like. And, you know, I kind of think back a little bit on some of the cities that we're working on, and you know, it's making sure that the full ecosystem is really there, because part of the brokenness is that the full ecosystem is not fully up and operating. You guys are doing a great job, but we're in this philanthropic capital that we're working on for the Valley of Death, which we discussed in the last panel. If you can get essentially venture capital, people like in St. Louis, the guy that runs it, Eric Gove, the biogenerator, they've invested a total of 21 million in 72 companies, and they've brought in $700 million of additional capital. And one company, they put $1.5 million in for a third of the company, and it got sold for $100 million. Yes, it's in increments, so they didn't get it all at once. But that's fairly typical of life science, but I'll take that deal any day because they got their capital out right away. But, you know, it would really be good if some of that stuff is done, and what they do in the philanthropic model is they give you their due diligence. Now, there's a caveat. They have a one-pager saying, and you didn't rely on us. Well, that's for legal reasons, but the Angels have sort of a similar type of thing. You didn't rely on it. You've done some of your own checking here, but here's a roadmap of things to check that you might find interesting. You know, could you comment on that? You know, this is one of the goals. I think this is one of the holes in the scheme of getting things funded and getting it off of the shelf, so to speak, and getting promising companies going, because in the first couple of years you're actually doing research, you're collecting the data so that, you know, you guys can make a decision whether this is really worth following. It's really the de-risking thing. But could you comment on that?
Well, I mean, we always share our due diligence, and I think it's so helpful to have when people come in with a deal memo, and especially, we're not specialists in life science. We do a fair amount, but we're definitely not specialists. And so, you know, if an angel group that is a specialist comes to us and they've done the due diligence, we can move very quickly. And I think that's also how we try to be entrepreneur-centric, because entrepreneurs spend way too much time jumping through hoops for, you know, various investors and jumping through the same hoops again and again. And if somebody's done it, you know, we want to make it move quickly and try to build the larger syndicates.
I mean, we look to see that there's some other early money usually, but it's not dilutive, whether it's foundation, grant money, ESPER, etc. When the deals come to us from other places, if it comes to us from another angel group, they'll skip the pre-screening, and they'll be invited to present. So that's sort of the one right free ticket that they get because of that. But then if they end up going into diligence, it's a full due diligence until we get to the point where we're comfortable that you know, we don't think we're gonna lose our money. We think we actually can get a return in that sense. But you know, I think since everybody's investing to their comfort level, everybody needs to get to their comfort level to be able to make that investment decision, and it's different for every group.
Yeah, I think, no.
Yeah, go ahead. Do you have anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of, I think you talked a little bit about collaboration, particularly in the life sciences community in Boston. everybody knows everybody. And so we will find ourselves working with different, and actually, to be honest, several angels belong to multiple angel networks. And so we'll be sharing diligence both officially between groups and unofficially. Have you heard this? Have you heard that? So a lot of that stuff, I think, tends to reduce friction in the context of diligence. And then also, because of the structure in Sky Ventures, we have a number of micro funds who, and I've been on some deals where people have domain experts that they hire to support their fund investment, and that sort of gets pulled into the mix as well.
Yeah, one of the things that, since I've attended Sky Ventures, I can comment on that I thought was very helpful, is that after the company presents, it's opened up the floor for what, 10 or 15 minutes?
Sure.
So that you get questions and you can kind of get a sense of where things are going, whether there's any interest or not, but then I think what you do is you poll them afterwards, right?
Right. So we have a conversation. So like any group, there are certain folks who tend to be more outspoken, and you kind of hear their voices a fair amount. But in general, there's an opportunity to have a conversation after a company presentation, sort of live. And then afterwards, polling usually within 48 to 72 hours, so you still have fresh in your mind what your thoughts were, your notes are still relevant.
Great. Do we have some more questions? There we have one.
I'm just interested to know how you structure the deal in terms of convertible debt, equity, preferred.
So that's actually, when we're talking about syndication, that's actually one of the places that tends to be tricky in early stage syndication, because there's some angel groups, for example, that will absolutely, like, positively will not touch a safe, for example. There are angel groups that if you tell them it's convertible debt, like, thanks, we're done. Sky, I think, is a bit more agnostic. We don't really care. What we're interested in is what is the potential return. So if you can explain how we get a return the particular vehicle is being proposed, okay, fine. Right? And if we don't understand it, then it's also okay, fine.
We're pretty open. I don't like the safes, but we've done them. We'll certainly do a note and equity. And so if we're leading, then we'll get in there and negotiate, depending on what makes sense. Is it time to price the deal, or does it feel a little early for that? There was one company where it was quite early, but we said if we're going to lead this, we want to do an equity round, and it was because we wanted to make sure we put all the governance into place. It was a newer entrepreneur, and we felt that being a part of the board and setting up that early governance would be really helpful to the company. And we also thought that we could raise more on equity in this case, and it was a company that really needed to grow quickly, not in the life science space, it was actually a tech company. So, depending on what the needs of the company are, I think we'll do that. If there have been too many notes already, we'll want to see those convert into equity, because we've seen some entrepreneurs get into trouble with just too many notes and building up this huge, massive debt that then needs to convert the next round, and it makes the valuation very difficult. Case by case, I'd say.
So we don't like safes. We prefer not to do convertible. I think there's a spot for convertibles, and I think more like in the bridge area, as opposed to when you're starting off, actually, because by the time you take a convertible note and you write in all the protections that you need, you end up with a priced round document. So you really didn't save the money or anything.
And probably the lawyer bills for a priced round.
Right. And the other thing is, we all have a sophisticated group behind us, and we believe that we can make a determination of what a willing buyer and a willing seller can come to in terms of an agreement on price. So let's do a priced round. Let's not kick the can down the road. So if we're leading, we will try to persuade the company to do a priced round. If we're following, then basically you're following whatever the terms are, and you take it or leave it.
You both are talking a little bit about some of the lessons you've learned. Can you expand on, are there other lessons that you've learned over the last 5 years of investing here that would be kind of helpful for people to know, so maybe you could start out with that.
I can talk about some pet peeves if you like.
So what?
Some pet peeves if you like.
Yeah, and that's fine. You know, this is a group that is very interested in what's going on, and let's put it out on the table.
So I don't like family members involved in company. I don't like it when there's, you know, father and son, husband and wife, you know, uncles and whatever it is. I think it brings in the wrong element. You'll point out correctly to some families that have been very successful in this country, the Waltons and others, but I think that it makes it very difficult. You're adding an element to the company that does not belong there. You know, Thanksgiving dinner is not always as comfortable. Where, you know, you can't fire your wife very effectively. You can't tell your son he's doing an incompetent job in whatever it is. You can't tell your dad they don't know anything about the science. It's really very difficult to do that. And it does not belong in the company. So yes, we have invested in companies that are family members, but it's always a red flag when we see them.
Victoria?
Just speaking of red flags, just really paying attention to them from the beginning. You know, not just paying attention to those red flags and moving on when those red flags start appearing, whatever they are to you.
Yeah, I think one of the things that sort of stands out is, again, we talked a little bit about this earlier about relationships and understanding. Usually the companies that are coming to us are early stage enough so that they're largely driven by the CEO. And trying to see how the CEO has gone about creating the network and the relationships, not just in the investment community, which is kind of what we're talking about here today, but also in the community and the ecosystem in which they're sort of going to be operating. So if they're medical device, an aspiring medical device company, what have they done to talk to other medical device companies to validate, to get some sort of feedback? If it's a company where the technology is driven largely by academic discoveries, how broad is the understanding or the sort of the scientific backing for these concepts, and the way that you sort of see the CEO begin to sort of expand the network of support of the company. I think it's actually really interesting and it's really compelling for investors, because a lot of the stuff that we're doing is we're simply trying to understand and evaluate risk. And we have to do that sort of by what amounts to social validation. And so that's, I think, something that a number of companies that come into us don't seem to quite get. Like they're so convinced that what they've got is great, and I'm sure it could be, but they don't really do the work to sort of show us how lots of people think it's great.
Okay, we have time for another question.
Just in general, I know we talked about kind of isolated instances where you want to invest in something that's under $15 million to get to the market or the inflection point. Are there opportunities to work with venture capitalists, for example, in biotech therapeutics that cost so much money to develop in clinical studies?
You mean in the context of?
Well, so say you want to exit in 2 or 3 years after you hit like a phase 2 milestone in a clinical study, something like that.
Concept, sure.
Yeah.
I mean, how does that work?
Yeah, do you work with VCs and then they do the Series A?
Well, the VC buy you out.
Oh, you're saying
Is
the
that
VC
correct?
buy you out?
Yeah.
In general, no.
Okay.
All right, so the venture capitalist is interested in their exit, not yours, right? So I have seen some situations where a company reaches a certain point and then a venture fund takes all the equity that existed because they want to grow it up themselves. But that's like, I can think of one, and I've been in the venture, entrepreneurial community for like 20 years. So I don't know what that tells you, but that's a data point anyway.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly will work with VCs to try to get them to fund, provide follow-on funding for our companies, and we'll make introductions, to VCs that we think will be good to the company, and hopefully, not completely squeeze us out. But one of the biggest risks I see for our companies is the funding risk, is who's going to fund that next round, and we'll certainly participate at our pro rata, but we're not, as an angel group, not going to be able to, lead that in.
This is one of the areas where I think the angels and families can work together very nicely, because you're already getting companies that I think are a profile that families should be interested in. So I'm just hoping that we can help accelerate that effort.
Well, and we are finding some of our companies are having success by going to the family offices for those next rounds, for sure. And I think that needs to continue. And I've heard of...
Expand.
Yes, expand. I've heard of many entrepreneurs saying, you know what, I'm not going to go to the VC route, I'm going to try to go family office
Because it
route.
doesn't, a lot of places, it just doesn't work anyway.
So in terms of VC, I mean, if you think about the model, when you come to that later round, VCs want to make sure that management has enough equity so they remain incentivized. And they want to make sure the company has enough money to move forward. And they want to make sure that there's now a pool set aside for an incentive pool for the employees that will join, et cetera. And so they say, well, who doesn't bring any value moving forward? Oh, it's the early investors. How about we squeeze them out? So that's, and I mentioned this on a panel once, and I had this one guy on my left talk to the other guy and say, hey, you guys just did that to us. And the guy's like, oh, it was my partner, it wasn't me. So that's the way it works. So we try to create reciprocity relationships with VCs where we say, we'll send you over the deals that are too big, you send us the deals that are too small. None of them have ever materialized. We've never been able to do that. And we will not knowingly invest ahead of VCs.
We have come up to the magic hour, and I think the panelists have done a great job. And I want